Nice tie, Adam. Sorry, I've let the side down rather. I'm sorry.
Well, I'm afraid you have, Ken. Sorry, mate.
I brushed my hair anyway.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, it's 2 o'clock on the 9th of June, which means that we are now commencing the meeting of the Hertfordshire County Council Resources and Performance Cabinet Panel. This meeting is being live streamed to the public. If you are a member of the public watching us, you're extremely welcome. We very much appreciate the fact that you're engaging in the process. It's good to have you on board. I'm the chairman of this panel. My name is Bob Deering, and I'm afraid everybody will just have to bear with me. I have one or two announcements that I'm required to just give before we get down to the business of today's meeting. So the first announcement I need to make is in relation to COVID-19 meeting attendance issues. Due to the coronavirus pandemic, the council will be holding this meeting electronically in accordance with the relevant regulations. Members of the public may also attend this meeting in an electronic capacity, and there is a link on the council's website for them to do so. Members of the council are asked to keep their microphones switched off, muted, until called to speak, and to switch their microphones off again once they've finished speaking. Cameras may be left on throughout the meeting if members wish. If you experience connection or other technical issues, it may help to switch your camera off. Cameras should be switched on if and when speaking in the meeting. To indicate a wish to speak, members should use the raise hand function, not the chat function. At the end of the debate on each item of business, there will be a vote. Members should vote using the meeting chat function by indicating for, against, or abstain. And with the assistance of officers, I will declare the result after each vote. Today's meeting, by the standards of this panel, has an unusually short agenda, so it may not be a particularly lengthy meeting. We'll have to see. But as a general proposition, breaks of at least 15 minutes will be held every 2 hours and will be taken after a speaker in the debate has finished speaking. If we are voting, the vote will be concluded before the break is taken. Other breaks will be incorporated as appropriate. To repeat again, members should be conscious that as this meeting is being live streamed, members of the press and public may be watching. Okay, I'm now going to move on to introduce to all those who are watching this meeting, the members of the committee. And I'm simply going to take members in alphabetical order. And when I call your name, if you could just switch your camera on and just very briefly introduce yourself. So the first member is Mario Saltimi.
Good afternoon. So I'm Mario Saltimi. I am the County Councillor for Welwyn Garden City South.
Thank you very much, Marius. Next up on the list is Ken Crofton.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Ken Crofton. I'm the County Councillor for Hertford Rural.
Thank you, Ken. Alphabetically, I'm next up. So my name again is Bob Deering. I'm the chairman of this panel, and my division is Hertford St Andrews. Next, we have Steve Jarvis.
Hi, I'm Steve Jarvis, and I'm the County Councillor for Royston Western Rural.
Thank you very much, Steve. Next is Tony Kingsbury.
Good afternoon, I'm Tony Kingsbury and I'm the County Councillor for Welwyn Division.
Thank you. Paul Mason. something happening out there, Paul, but we're not quite communicating. Ah, here you are.
Good afternoon, Chairman. Sort of froze just as you called my name, but that's typical, isn't it? I suppose. Paul Mason, County Councillor for Hoddesdon South. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Adam Mitchell.
Hello, I'm Adam Mitchell. I'm the County Councillor for Broadwater and Stevenage, and I'm the Vice Chairman.
Thank you very much. Sally Symington. You're muted, Sally.
Sorry, rookie error. Hello. Yes, hello, Chairman. I'm Sally Symington. I'm the County Councillor for Tring Division, and I'm the Lib Dem spokesperson for Resources and Performance.
Thank you very much. One of the many Williams in the council. This is Tim Williams.
Good afternoon. We're one Williams short nowadays, as we all know. Yes. Good afternoon. It's Tim Williams here. I'm a member for the Woodside Stanborough Division, which is in the North of Watford area. Thank you.
Thank you very much indeed. And finally, but by no means least, Colette White-Lowe, who is substituting today for Councillor John Graham. Colette.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm Colette White-Lowe. I am the County Councillor for Hemel Hempstead North East, otherwise known as Groveville and Woodard Farm, and I've represented them since 2009. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Colette. Okay, thank you very much. We have one apology, who I believe is not substituted today, and that's the Labour member Sharon Taylor. So hopefully Sharon will be back with us next time. I did warn you that there's a number of these announcements. The next announcement I'm required to make is in relation to member interests. I'm not so sure that we will do this for every meeting, but since this is the first meeting of this panel for this administration, it falls to be done. So member interests. If a member considers that he or she has a disclosable pecuniary interest in any matter to be considered at the meeting, they must declare that interest and must not participate in or vote on that matter unless a dispensation has been granted by the Standards Committee. If a member considers that he or she has a declarable interest as defined in paragraph 5.3 of the Code of Conduct for Members in any matter to be considered at the meeting, they must declare the existence and nature of that interest. If a member has a declarable interest, they should consider whether they should participate in consideration and vote on the matter. We're getting nearer the business end of these announcements, but I'm also required, again, since this is the first panel meeting of this administration, just to note what is the remit of the panel. So the remit of this panel is finance, which is revenue and capital, property, including operational assets and development, technology, human resources, legal, democratic and statutory services, procurement, assurance, including risk management, audit and health and safety, customer service centre and website, trading entities, including Hearts Full Stop, Hertfordshire Catering Limited and Hearts Living Limited, and also performance management. There we go. If you're not exhausted already, I most certainly am. Very good. So now turning to the body of the agenda. We're on agenda item number 2 now, and this is the minutes. So I'm inviting the panel to agree the minutes of the Resource and Performance Cabinet panel held on the 12th of March. I think Scott's just put his hand up. Scott's the Director of Resource and Performance. Scott, hi.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman, and hello, members. I just wanted to provide a little bit more detail on a minute that we recorded. Let me just get it right, which was around the Ombudsman inquiries. It's part of our annual complaints and comments and compliments report that we presented to panel last time. There was an issue about an issue of falsifying records that I think the minutes it could indicate or could be read as that some of our officers had been falsifying records. If I just be clear that the answer that's been circulated to members prior to the election, but maybe for this panel's reference, is that in terms of the local government ombudsman report, which stated that officers had been falsifying records, it's been clarified that the case related to the provision of care commissioned by the county council. An employee of First Choice Medical Solutions, which provided home care to a service user, attended the service user's home but falsified the care records to state that they had visited, seen the service user and given him breakfast. In fact, the carer had failed to notice the service user was deceased and had not carried out the duties required by the care plan. The carers assumed that the service user was asleep but did not check on his welfare. The Ombudsman acknowledged that the council had carried out a thorough safeguarding investigation in terms of what happened, but appropriate recommendations and continue to keep the case on, and we keep the case under review. As care providers' response to the matter did not provide an apology to the service user's daughter as an agreed outcome, it was confirmed that the council would provide a written apology and will provide the Ombudsman with the outcome of the inspection of First Choice. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much indeed, Scott. If I might just say, I think that's an extremely good example of the value of questions. And of course, that's a very good answer. And it's very, very good to know that no member of the County Council erred in any way in relation to that matter. So we're very grateful to you for that, Scott. Thank you very much. Moving on now, item 3, public petitions. It's not my understanding that we have any.
Sorry,
petitions.
Chairman, can we just vote in the minutes? Sorry.
So I beg your pardon, yes. In that case, I think I need a proposer and a seconder to vote in the minutes.
No, you don't need that. You just need to ask members to put in the chat whether they agree the minutes, please.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. If members can then just note in chat whether they're happy with the minutes, please, I'd be grateful. I'm seeing a lot of agreed, Sarah Lane. I hope you've been counting. Yeah, okay, good. I have it confirmed. So the minutes are agreed. Thank you very much, everybody. Okay, we can now move to item 3, which is public petitions. It's not my understanding that we have any. Is that correct?
That's correct. No public petitions, Chairman.
Thank you very much indeed. Good. So that moves us on to item 4, which is the performance monitor for Q4 in relation to Hertfordshire County Council. And I think I'm right to say that Alex James with Martin Orst are going to talk to this item. Away you go, Alex.
Thank you, Chairman, and good afternoon, panel. As mentioned, I'm Alex James, Head of Corporate Policy, and joined by Martin Orst, Head of Intelligence, who I know just sort of put his camera on there just for a moment as well. So this report provides an overview of the Council's performance for Q4 of 2020-21. So the period covering January to March 21. So if we can cast our mind back, it's obviously not too far, but obviously clearly a period of COVID lockdown. So worth perhaps taking that into context in terms of some of the things I'm going to be highlighting. But I suppose for new members of the panel, it's worth just perhaps mentioning these reports are produced on a quarterly basis for consideration at Cabinet panel. You will see that this particular report is ordered in the portfolio areas that were in place prior to the election, which we felt was appropriate considering it was looking at Q4, but clearly going forward this will be amended to reflect the new situation. More broadly, I should stress this report and the content it includes is constantly under review, both as part of the ongoing process we have with service areas, but also more recently to ensure it fits with the new leaders' aspirations around performance management as well. But also, therefore, your feedback on the report is always very welcome. For those who are aware of kind of seeing the previous reports, I will follow my usual approach, but I'll bring some slides up in a moment just to cover some key highlights from each section, and afterwards Martin and I will be happy to take questions or comments on the entirety of the report. So I'm just going to very briefly, hopefully, just make sure I've got the slides brought up. And hopefully you can see those as I just move to presentation mode. So, as I say, I'll go through the various different portfolio areas in turn, just bringing a few highlights out. But as I say, happy to take any questions as we progress. So, at the end, and obviously on the entire report as well. So, starting with adult care and health, in general, adult care activity is now returning to pre-COVID levels, although worth mentioning the rates of permanent admissions to care homes in both age categories, as shown on the slide, remain below pre-pandemic levels at the end of Q4. In terms of the referrals to the Money Advice Unit, following a decrease in referrals in comparison in 2021 in comparison to 2019-20, activity had now returned to pre-COVID levels in Q4 with a 12% increase in comparison to the previous quarter. And I should also mention, in terms of the report, there is the score of a particular red-rated risk, failure of care providers in Hertfordshire, had increased due to its probability changing to almost certain due to the pandemic causing a number of different pressures on providers in that particular sector. Moving to children, young people and families. The rate of referrals to specialised children's services increased considerably in March following the reopening of schools, and further increases are expected from May onwards following the Easter holidays, and that we will see if that comes through in the Q1 report. The number of children subject to a child protection plan has increased this quarter, however, overall numbers remain low. And the number of children looked after has remained static this quarter, but overall numbers are higher than before the pandemic. Public health and prevention. Public health continues to prioritise the COVID-19 response, and other essential public health services have had to be delivered in different ways. So, for instance, health checks have still been able to be delivered, albeit at a reduced level. The percentage of new birth visits being carried out within 14 days of delivery, however, increased this quarter and remained above target. Drug and alcohol completion rates have declined, although representation rates have improved, which broadly I understand means that service users are remaining in treatment for a longer period of time, but few are representing once again once having been successfully discharged. And I should just mention here, in terms of the public health and prevention indicators, these are reported a quarter in arrears. So actually, we're looking at Q3 figures here. Community safety and waste management, primary fires and primary fire injuries both reduced this quarter. This was balanced to some extent by an increase in secondary fires and a reduction in first pump attendance times as well. There has also been a decrease in this quarter due to the lockdown conditions, to the number of risk-based assessments and safe and well visits that were able to be conducted. But it's worth stressing that the most vulnerable did continue to be visited even during this particular time. The Q4 report does show each year the finalised waste data, or this is actually for the year before, so we're actually looking at 1920 data. But this does show that residual waste collected per household had decreased slightly, and indeed also the amount of waste being recycled and composted had also increased as well. Whereas you'll see in that third graph, there has also been a rise in the percentage of waste collected going into landfill, reflecting the competing pressures for availability of regional energy recovery facilities, and therefore sometimes not having the access to bring that kind of waste over to those facilities, and therefore it being directed to landfill. Growth, infrastructure, planning and the economy. Overall, unemployment figures show that the pandemic continued to have a big impact on employment in the county, with Hertfordshire's year-on-year increase considerably higher than that of England as a whole. The number of young people not in education, employment or training also saw an increase this quarter. I also should mention a couple of risks here in this particular section. A new red rated risk, economic impact of the pandemic in Hertfordshire, has been added to the council's risks register, and a further red rated risk, pressures on services due to population growth, has been refocused to encompass broader funding pressures from the whole growth agenda. Highways and the environment. Overall performance of the highway service contract improved this quarter and remains well above minimum performance requirements. The percentage of schemes delivered against the integrated works programme, however, decreased this quarter, primarily due to difficulties in accessing local roads due to the lockdown. In terms of other environment indicators, should point out the project income secured from sources external to the countryside and rights of way service saw a very large increase this year, which enabled improvements to rights of way, redundant railway lines and river restoration. And a further risk I wanted to highlight, there is a new red rated risk, as a report mentions, around climate change. This has been added, replacing an earlier risk relating to extreme weather events. Education, libraries and localism. Library services continue to be impacted by COVID-19 restrictions, with library buildings remaining closed throughout the quarter. As a result, as would be expected, both library issues and library visits reduced this quarter, although it's perhaps worth stressing the online issues were 68% higher than the same period last year, obviously indicating the demand being moved into that area. Should also just mention that we haven't got any school information at the moment. That tends to be relatively kind of at different times in the year. One thing we would normally show is the percentage of Hertfordshire schools are graded as good or outstanding in regards to Ofsted inspections. We know that obviously those inspections haven't been happening in the last few quarters, or indeed the last year or so. But I do understand that Ofsted have recently released their plans for resuming inspections in the summer term. So hopefully we'll be starting to sort of get some more information on that as time progresses. Final section is resources and performance. Workforce headcount has increased this quarter, mainly due to additional staff being recruited to support the pandemic response. Total pay bill and agency spend have also increased in line with this. And average annual sickness rates have reduced to 5.4 days per year for the council as a whole, which is well beneath the council's 7-day target. And finally, I wanted to mention apprenticeships. There have been 217 apprenticeship starters for the council this year, which is 30 more than its annual target. At the same time, approximately 91,000 of historic apprenticeship levy the council has to pay and then try and claim back around in terms of training for apprentices has expired due to it not being used in the last 24 months. Whilst the council would ideally use all of these funds, with annual spend on apprenticeships increasing year on year since the introduction of the levy in 2017, as you'll see in the graph, the amount of expired levy is slowly reducing over time. And I understand the county council is in a better position or a more favourable position than many of its neighbouring comparators, but clearly some more work to be done there still. And that's where I'll leave it, and I'll bring these slides down, but very happy, as I say, to take any thoughts or comments or questions.
Thank you very much indeed, Alex. I'm looking at hands. I've got one hand up. That's Colette Whitelow. Colette, if you have a question, do please.
Thank you, Chairman. It was regard to the adult social care. I've got two, in fact. The first one is about adult social care, and it was 1.1.6. And my question is, why is there no target for the percentage of repeat incidents of domestic violence? And it's bracketed HCS 105. I mean, if there is no target, how have we measured? I mean, it does claim improved performance. How have we been able to measure that if there has been no percentage target set? That's the first one.
So we'll take them one at a time. I see Martin's on the screen. If you want to deal with that, Martin.
Yeah, the answer is there are a number of measures you notice throughout the report, Colette, where there aren't targets for specific reasons. If I could perhaps indicate things like death by seriously killed and injured. There are some things that in the public domain as well as the performance domain we wouldn't want to necessarily set a target, as we don't want to, if you like, pitch at a figure and then say we're not hitting it. We want more domestic use.
Understand.
Yeah, but there is still an absolutely valid point underneath that about what is what is where do we think we are, as it were, performing as might be expected given the context, and two things we look at to help us with that at service level. The key one is about direction of travel. I mean, that's really what we're looking at, as distinct from the target. Is it getting better? Is it getting worse, crudely? And the other complementary is about how are others doing as best as we can compare. So it's between those two things, but specifically in this one, we're not setting a target for that reason. We don't want to set a target. We want to manage and reduce as far as possible is the target, the number of incidents in the county.
Thank you, Martin. That's very helpful. Forgive me if my comments seem a bit naive. It's the first time I've ever appeared on resources. The second one is with regard to public health, and it talks about successful quits of smoking. And I just wanted to check that the figures that you gave were 548 previous success in the previous quarter. And then the next figure is 592. And I just wanted to check that is 592 new quits rather than just an incremental total on top of the 548.
Yes, I will check, but it is the number in that quarter.
Right.
So okay. It's not cumulative.
Right. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Colette. Thank you, Martin. I should have given you a particular welcome on board, Colette. It's quite remarkable that someone of your longevity with the council is only for the first time today appearing on resource and performance. It's very good to have you with us. Thank you very much. Okay, my next hand that I'm seeing is from Sally Symington.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, thank you, Martin and Alex. I wanted to ask a couple of questions. The first one is about 2.1.7, the education, health and care plans, which you list as having 441 requests, of which 201 are completed. What I wanted to ask is what is that a total of? What would be the total of people having education, health and care plans, so that we can contextualize the quantum relative to how many people are already on that scheme, and presumably they come off it in time as they progress out of education. But
perhaps if I can answer that, Sally, the total is known. Sitting here, I don't know what it is. I think the key point to build in, yes, we need perhaps now to build in both the overall picture as well as any of the elements within that are material to the performance agenda. So I have asked the question, I haven't got it, and I have looked for the answer this morning, but obviously it's bigger than the total there. So it's a matter of looking at the movement of the two and providing that context around it. So in terms of learning points, things we'll do as a continuous improvement trajectory, we'll certainly build that in for the next quarter.
Okay, thank you. I think that would be appreciated very much. I know that it's a big issue in our area, how many people are able to access these. The second question I had is it's a sort of tangential possibly, but it's related to your new red risk item for the climate crisis. I think it's 6.2. I guess I'm going to ask specifically about, do you record, or is it possible to record, there seem to be sort of increased flooding incidents, not just from climate emergency, but also just generally a sort of there seem to be just coming from many directions, which might be kind of blocked drains. I've got reports of people with sewage problems, backing up from either flooding or, so basically how highways, in the flooding on highways, whether it comes off the fields or whether it's, I guess ultimately it's all comes from the same, it's all water. But it's also impacting on people's houses in terms of, their everyday living. And I wondered if and I guess that does go back effectively to the climate crisis in terms of the additional rainfall we're getting and changes in soil and the way things drain. So is there any way that we can sort of start to measure that and capture it? Or perhaps you do somewhere else and I've missed it, and I'm sorry if that's the case.
In terms of where we're at now, I mean, the main activity of the whole authority in relation to this much broader now risk in the context of climate emergency, as opposed to, as we said before, here was extreme weather events, clearly huge link between the two. I mean, the straight answer is we are baselining. That's the critical thing we're doing now, which is an enormous exercise to make sure that before we start saying what the targets are, which is what will crucially be coming to this board and others in terms of our progress towards those 2030, 2050 targets, where do we start from? And that's the activity that we're, as I speak, as an organisation, heavily involved in now in pulling together. That I'm not quite sure which panel that will be going to in terms of the overall, but the performance elements of that we will pull off and surface through this panel, which is indeed the remit of this panel, is to keep that eye on what else is going on. I'm very confident, but again, I can't give you the detail. I'm not close enough to the service, but those elements are measured, most of them, but not all of them. And indeed, you know, flood is probably quite granular, is what we need. And I'm sure it exists, but not in the context of reporting performance towards the climate crisis, more about operational within the context of service delivery. So, you know, we're nowhere near that yet as an organisation. I don't think anyone else is, quite frankly. But it's, you know, the organisation is hugely mobilised on that. And the key activity, as I say, is baselining. Before we start dreaming up targets, we just have to know exactly where we're at, how we're going to measure it, how we're going to report it.
Okay, thank you. Can I just ask what's the timescale for that baselining exercise is?
I'm happy to defer to others. I think it's months. I don't know if Scott or Alex have got a closer handle on it. And it's, to be honest, it's not going to be something that we start now and finish on one day. It's going to be evolving as our ability, including with partners, of course, develops. So I think it's certainly within the current financial year, there'll be a much clearer statement of what our targets are. And what our baselines are, but that won't be the end of it. We'll need to move that, as indeed the national agenda itself is changing, including over the last week or so.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Sally. Next question comes in from Steve Jarvis. You're muted. That's it.
Okay, right. Yes, I have two questions. The first is it relates to 619, which is about the generation of income by the countryside and rights of way, which I guess is predominantly Section 106 income. And whilst it's good to know that we're generating lots of contributions from developers, it seems to me we also ought to be tracking the rate at which we are able to translate those contributions into improvements in the rights of way network in the countryside. So we ought to be measuring the outputs as well as the inputs. So I wonder whether we could add that as a performance monitor, so we can see how effectively we're using those resources that we're collecting from developers. So that's my first point. And the second one, it also relates to the issue of the climate crisis and the additional risk. And it seemed to me the risk covered two things which are rather different in their nature. The first is the risk that not just the council's response to the climate crisis, but the country's and the world's doesn't achieve the sort of results that we all hope it will. And frankly, our ability to control that is probably zero, but we need to be aware of it. And the second is our inability, or perhaps our potential failure, to plan for changes. And even if everybody's attempts to limit the impact of the climate crisis are successful, there are still going to be continuing changes. And the risk of failure to plan for those changes is really a risk of a completely different sort from the risk of the climate crisis continuing to develop. And I wonder whether or not wrapping those two up in one risk rather obscures that, because there's one that we need to think about what we're going to do, and there's others where we're fairly clear that we need to take some action. So should those actually be separately identified as different risks?
Yeah, thanks, Steve. Again, Martin, you okay with that?
Probably not. I'll do my best. I think we've gone from one extreme to another here in terms of how we phrase the risk for almost understandable reasons. It is an all-embracing risk now. It's holistic in that sense. So you're absolutely right, Steve. It does pick up or include a whole raft of other contributory factors. From a performance angle, I'm fairly sure our performance reporting role here will be on our contribution to this agenda in the context of climate change, i.e. what we can control, and that the other aspects will be feeding in, still within the risk, but as control measures, I suspect, because this is just the high level wording of the risk. There will be, probably are, dozens, hundreds probably of, if you like, actions or control measures. Some of those will touch on the things that we're not fully in control of. And our whole sustainability strategy is about us being a leader and an enabler. And it's those things that touch on how we can influence others, including people's behaviour, their ability to do things and their desire to do things as citizens, how we can affect that to the same extent. So this is purposely all embracing, almost not to miss. It was probably too focused on extreme weather events before and has been broadened out. So my answer is really the control measures will pick that up. And again, we'll need to look at how we pull that in, or the parent panel will particularly, but we will too in the performance context look to see how we put in something that provides a narrative that you can engage with and citizens can engage with to see where we are and how we're doing.
So we should expect to see some performance measures relating to that appearing in the future.
Yeah, I mean, that has to be the direction of travel. And the danger is we try and put everything in there, and that's not really going to help anyone.
No,
else. So, yeah, that's developing that narrative.
Okay, okay.
Thank you very much, Steve. Can I just interject there? Steve's opening proposition was that increase in funding that he specifically mentioned to was probably Section 106 money. Just for the benefit of the panel, is that right, or has there been, as it were, separate external grant funding coming in of some nature?
Yes. No, it's a mixture, Chairman. I think it's Section 106 monies, isn't it, Martin, as well as a sustainable transport grant as well. So it's a melding of number of pots, but I haven't got the actual new numbers to hand, although Martin may have, but certainly it's a mixture.
Yeah, okay, thanks very much. All right, next up is Tim Williams, please.
Thank you very much, Bob. It probably slightly follows on from Steve Jarvis's question there. I was going to pick up a point on page 47 of the agenda pack. It's paragraph 5.1.4. It's just regarding the risk factor in regards to the ENV 0149, pressure on services due to population growth. I know Alex sort of mentioned it in passing when he was introducing the report, but yes, as we all know, Hertfordshire is very much going through an unprecedented period of growth, and rightly residents are fearing the pressures on infrastructure ranging from the roads, transport systems, NHS provision, education, refuge, household recycling centres, really the sort of full Monty of all the infrastructure issues. I do remember about 18 months ago, 2 years ago, attending a presentation in County Hall in the council chamber where the infrastructure was discussed, and they were sort of highlighting with the housing coming in sort of thing that there was going to be a severe lack of funding to address all these infrastructure reasons. I think all councillors who attended that session, whatever political persuasion, were quite aghast at the situation. And no doubt this is the reason why there is a high risk or attribute to it. But I just wonder if, Alex, you could explain a bit more what the council is doing on that one, or if not to yourself, Bob, because you're coming in from the administration side of how we're going to be tackling this period of growth in Hertfordshire.
Start with you, Alex, insofar as it's falls to your remit, as it were, to comment there.
I see that Scott's got his hand up, so I'll defer to him just in a moment. But I do know, I haven't got the information to hand, but I do know that there are plans in place for a broader briefing on these issues from the Growth Board being planned very soon. So hopefully that, if not today, there'll be some of those answers provided in due course.
Okay, let's come into Scott then. Thanks, Scott.
Yeah, thanks, Chairman. So you know, the way that I see that the council is going to be looking to sort of reduce and mitigate this risk over the medium to longer term is with its continued active participation and involvement in the Growth Board. Just for members that are not aware of that we have a cross local government partnership between district councils and the county council, working on and highlighting all the infrastructure requirements, of which is going to have considerable billions of pounds in terms of need identified to be able to support the current and future growth of what we're going to see within the county. So expectation will be is by working together with our district partners and highlighting where the big strategic infrastructure pieces of kit, roads, highways, etc., are all needed. We would then go to government with effectively a business plan, because ultimately, there is a clear business plan. If we are going to be taking the growth, you need to deal with the infrastructure up front to enable it to be done and obviously to be able to thrive in a sustainable way, as we would hope in Hertfordshire. So, yeah, that's where we're focusing our efforts through the Growth Board to deliver that a mitigation against that risk over the long term, Chair.
Yeah, thanks very much, Scott. I think it would also be fair to say that Section 106 is important, and I think it's long been a mantra of Hertfordshire County Council that all the district planning authorities need to be as robust as they can when it comes to raising Section 106 monies, as the question obviously suggests. Infrastructure is necessary. It does cost money. Funds do need to be realised from some quarter, and Section 106 has got its part to play in that. Okay, thank you very much, everyone. I've now got Tony Kingsbury, who has a hand up.
Thank you, Chairman. Not really very much to say. It's not a question. I just wanted to point out a lot of people have mentioned climate change and environmental things. I'm not used to this. I'm new to this panel and to the county, but looking through at the residual waste and particularly the household recycling, those numbers look very good and stand up very well against the east of England and also across England. So it's good to see that they're improving all the time and something that we're doing. That was what I was going to say. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much indeed, Tony. Obviously, waste as such is covered by a different panel, but I think it's fair to say that this council does a pretty good job on waste. Just being at risk of being a little bit parochial, quite close to me in Ware, a new facility was opened, I don't know, 6 months ago, was it? Something of that order. It's absolutely fantastic. You'd almost go and spend a holiday there. It's so good. So yeah, but obviously there's work to do. Never-ending task. But it's nice for you to pick that out, and officers will take note that you've noted the good work they're doing. Thank you very much. Okay. Now I'm not seeing any more hands showing, so I'm taking it therefore that we're happy that we have had our discussion on item 4. I don't know that we're voting on it. Do we vote on item 4 or just note it, Elaine?
Vote, please, Chairman. Thank you.
Okay. In that case, if I could ask for a vote, everybody who is happy with the Q4 HCC performance monitor, please note that in the chat box. Okay, I think we've done the rounds now. I think that not quite. No, there's 1 or 2 more coming in. I think we're there. So I think we're happy that that item is agreed. Sally Symington, you put your hand up again.
I did. I'm sorry, it's probably out of time, Chairman, but I just wanted to say that I really would like to extend my thanks to Martin and Alex and the team for the performance report. It was extremely useful, and given that effectively the pandemic is a black swan event, we are dealing with really, really difficult things and kind of discontinuities in all sorts of services. And I think to present a coherent set of statistics is really commendable. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much indeed. Excellent. Okay, I'm sure we'd all echo those thanks and that gratitude. Thank you very much, Alex and Martin. Right, let's move on. Item 5. This is another performance report. Just in case people are wondering why we had 2 performance reports, a bit like buses, they all come along at once. This one is specific to resource and performance. So I think again, Alex, you'll lead, will you? And then Martin might follow up as necessary. So over to you, Alex, please.
Thank you, Chairman. As you say, this particular quarter, the portfolio, this particular performance report covers the same period, so quarter 4, but for the resources and performance portfolio. And as with the overall performance report, we bring them together on a quarterly basis to kind of give panel the overall consideration and view on what's happening both for the whole council, but also for this portfolio as well. In terms of introduction, I think I would just say generally it feels a positive report with plenty of green, but as with the previous report, I'll try and bring out a few highlights before opening up to comments and questions. So won't go through every section, but a few sections to pick out. First of all, HR. As mentioned earlier, the overall council total pay bill has increased by just under 5 million this quarter for the overall council. This includes an increase of about £200,000 in resources in the resources department, and reflects the additional recruitment undertaken to support the pandemic, in particular the lateral flow testing and the vaccination centre staff. As I also mentioned, agency spend has also increased across the council this quarter and in resources. In resources, this is mainly due to an increase in specialist legal and finance roles. And annual sickness continues to decrease, as I say. Resources is down at 2.5 days compared to 5.4 days for the council as a whole. In assurance, at the end of the 2021 financial year, SIAS, the Shared Internal Audit Service, completed 91% of its programmed projects. Whilst this is 4% lower than the target of 95%, I think it's quite a positive result given the need for the service to work with it's the service areas across the council throughout the year undertaking this audit work, while obviously making sure they balance their need to quite rightly focus on their ongoing work responding to the pandemic as well. I should also mention fraud referrals. There was an increase in fraud referrals earlier in the year. Quarter 4 saw these referrals, though, decrease somewhat. And I think that was perhaps kind of seeing the end of kind of a push earlier in the year for fraud referrals, and perhaps kind of reflecting that kind of activity was perhaps coming to an end towards the end of quarter 4. Democratic and statutory services. Given the lockdown, we know, and perhaps unsurprisingly, the pandemic has had a significant impact on registration services income. Clearly, with all ceremonial services either being impacted by suspensions or restrictions, this has resulted in a significant loss of income. I should also mention timeliness of completion of inquest cases. The coroner service has experienced delays in the holding of inquest hearings due to the pandemic, but the service has maintained hearings where possible, and indeed the timeliness of the completion of cases did increase somewhat this quarter. And finally, in terms of community engagement, the average call waiting time at the customer service centre did increase this quarter, albeit remaining slightly above target. It should be factored in, though, that the service is working with a 6-second delay, which basically takes effect when connecting calls through the mobile phone network while staff are working from home. So above target, but certainly a handicap there for kind of our home working, just from the system's point of view, which means that clearly the figures are always going to be higher than they perhaps would have been, well, they certainly would have been if they were actually operating in the normal office environment. So I'll leave it there, but happy for Martin and I to take any questions you may have.
Thank you very much indeed, Alex. I'm just looking at my list to see if I can see any hands. Yeah, a couple have popped up. First one there was Sally Symington.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Alex, again. I wanted to ask a couple of questions about property. The first question relates to 3.1.2. Again, thank you both. Thank you for the report. Income for the rural estate increased from 119 million to 185, seems to have been on an upward trajectory. I just wondered how I guess I would have imagined that that it was a relatively stable figure, but anyway, it clearly isn't. So I wondered if you could explain that, please.
I'm not sure if Martin can help, but I must admit I don't have the details to hand, but certainly we can look into it. Certainly there's more stability there, I would argue, with these sort of estates than perhaps some of the buildings, because it's an ongoing kind of lease sort of arrangement. But no, we can find more details unless. Oh, sorry, I see Sass has got.
I was going to say, Alex, I'm just going to interject. We've got Sass Pledger, who's the senior property officer on this call, and she's very kindly put her hand up. So, Sass, if you can help with that question, that'd be great, please.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair. I'm Sass Pledger, the AD for property, and I actually have Emily White on the line, who manages the rural estate. So I am more than happy to, if you have time, to entertain us, just to defer to her, and she can answer that question specifically.
Thank you.
Is that okay, Chair?
Yeah, certainly very good for me.
Thank you Emily.
Yeah, good afternoon. So I think without seeing the background figures that have produced this particular report, but we do have a number of new lettings that we have put in place across the rural estate, and we also have a rent review process that we implement as well. So I would anticipate that those figures have been behind those increases that you've seen. You're correct, it is generally a fairly static estate, but there have been recently a few new farm lettings that we have put in place, and that would be an opportunity for us to increase the income here. Equally, if there is diversification by our tenants, then there's also the potential to consider whether or not an increased rental is due to reflect perhaps some commercialisation that they have adopted on their particular interests. Obviously, bearing in mind that we still want this estate to be viable, so it's a balancing act.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Sass. Emily, thank you very much.
Chairman, I have one other property related question, and it's to do with, I guess it's a kind of a metric that doesn't seem to be included, but I'm aware that property can be secured through Section 106 agreements, and that goes to Herts County Council. And I wondered if there was some way of measuring that, and particularly sort of, again, the input of that, but then also the output for it being delivered back to the community, because for community use once it's gone to Herts County Council, and then, as I said, it not getting stuck in the system, it actually being used by people. Residents.
It's a very good question. So generally the land that we acquire under Section 106 is in the main for school delivery. That's not the only land interest. And for example, there's a large scheme at Gilston at the moment where we are considering wider service need and whether or not land is required to deliver that. I think what is probably best is that we take it away, and I speak to my colleagues in the Growth and Infrastructure Unit, who would generally manage the Section 106 process in its entirety. And from that, we can look to see what information and data we can provide in terms of where we have secured land for delivery of school, and in any instances where that has been taken forward and we have already delivered via land that was put forward in that Section 106.
Okay, thank you very much.
Yeah, very helpful. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you. Okay, thank you, Sally. So I've got Steve Jarvis showing a hand.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I also had a property-related question in that we've got some metrics in terms of income generated from lettings of property. But there's also the council also had a significant property disposal programme in order to generate capital income, in order to get income per capital. And I wonder whether or not there should also be a performance metric in terms of the council's performance against delivering its capital income objectives in property.
Okay, got the question. I don't know whether any of the three officers whose photos appear on the screen at the moment want to respond. Or Scott, put his hand up. Scott, come in, Scott.
Yeah, I'll try and help in probably in a more sort of general way, but yeah, absolutely. There are a whole range of indicators that we monitor at a team level, up to a departmental level, and then obviously at a corporate level, and then ultimately at a member level. So filtering and deciding which indicators come to the fore is obviously some we're going to get, well, hopefully most we get right, but some we're going to get wrong. So just something that the new leader of the council has been highlighting is that a need for really what he wants to have a good deep dive in relation to all our performance reporting across the organisation, and the measures that we're bringing to members, to really make sure that we're holding officers to account for the performance that we're delivering based on the priorities that we've set ourselves and promised our residents. So with that in mind, the sorts of areas that Councillor Jarvis is referring to there, they're the ones we are capturing, and from a previous briefing that was raised with us, and we'll make sure those ones, such as disposal targets in terms of capital receipt targets that we do monitor versus how much we're actually delivering, will all be included within future data sets.
I'm obviously pleased to hear that, because that's clearly an area where performance has a fairly significant impact on the council's financial position, and we do need to make sure that we're monitoring the significant performance metrics, those that are really going to make a difference both to the council and to people in Hertfordshire.
Yeah. Yes. If I could come in there, I would completely endorse what Scott has just said about the need to keep these performance stats fresh. I think one of the things we definitely must try and avoid happening is that people become so familiar with the stats and the reports that the eyes just glaze over a bit. There's a lot of information in these performance reports. And an awful lot of it is actually quite important. So I think the business of keeping the data and the benchmarks live is very important, and it's something that that we certainly will be working on as this panel. Okay, all right. So I think that's all the hands gone. I think I don't know, Martin, your picture, you come back on the screen, but no, you're okay.
Apologies, as I was anticipating a question. I'll disappear for a sec.
You're just giving us a last chance to see you before you disappear into the sunset. Yeah, okay. All right, fine. So I've got no more. Oh, I do have a hand. Ken Crofton.
Thanks, Bob. I've just got in under the wire. It just occurred to me those Alex's figures about the substantial increase in the salary cost, mainly relating to COVID or pandemic recovery. I just wondered if they are temporary costs, whether that will go back to a normal level of budgeted salary shortly, or whether we can recover that cost from central government. I don't know whether we have any information on that, but it's £5 million, I think, per quarter. It's quite a substantial increase, and I don't think we sustain that for forever. I'd be interested to know where we are with that.
Yeah. I'm just looking to see if an officer wants to come in on that one. Otherwise, I will offer a comment. Alex, did you want to come back?
I'm very happy to say a very brief comment. As my understanding, I'm not quite sure. I think we wait to see how long term some of those positions are. I suppose that's still to be seen, isn't it? But it's my understanding, and happy, unless colleagues correct me, is that a lot of that funding will be picked up through the grant funding we're receiving from government. But we wait to see, I suppose, how long it continues for and how long those arrangements continue for.
Yes, Ken, I would have given a very, very similar answer, which is I don't know that the extra cost is necessarily embedded into the system now. As a broad proposition, we have received a substantial amount of funding from central government. So insofar as you quite rightly point out, the most immediate metric is that we've got an increase in our pay bill. I don't know that that's necessarily going to be permanent, and I think that the reality is a lot of that, if not all of it, actually has been covered by the support we've received from central government to help us meet the various COVID expenses that we've incurred.
Yeah, the danger is that you become comfortable with this additional overhead, and we get comfortable with the additional staff, and it's very difficult to shake it out of the system. I know we're talking about people at the end of the day, but and it's, you know, we can talk about it in a casual way about getting rid, but it's terribly easy to get comfortable with the level of overhead and comfortable with the level of staffing. So we just got to keep a close eye that, you know,
So I think the point you're making is a perfectly well made point. I think Scott wants to come back and pass a comment as well.
Yes, I know. I completely agree with Councillor Crofton that there is a real risk that we become addicted to this sort of higher level of spend, and we need to make sure that we appropriately can wean ourselves off of it over time. The time isn't right now, as probably members will appreciate. But we have in production at the moment a HCC recovery strategy, and as part of that, there are a number of phases that we've currently gone through. Effectively, the response emergency phase. We're then looking at a restore phase in terms of returning services back to some form of normality. And then there's a rethink stage, and that's really some of the lessons that we've learned, you know, from the pandemic has highlighted sort of much more efficient ways of working. Actually, some processes maybe weren't adding as much value as we once thought. So we would look to stop those or not restart those processes again. And then I would be looking for us to return to a normal baseline of funding. I think we can expect the government won't be able to, even if it wanted to shower us with significant levels of additional one-off grants over the course of the next year and beyond. So therefore, the money I think that we've had up to now and has been promised up to this point, I think we can pretty much sort of assume that that's it. And as I've pointed out with that those that have been involved in some of our financial monitoring is that the pandemic isn't a respecter of financial years. And we have put some money aside for the unforeseen issues of what we're likely to face during the course of this year. But I would certainly hope that we'd start to see a return to some form of normality in relation to our core budget from the next financial year onwards.
Yeah, I mean, if I may, I'd add to that as well. Again, Ken, your question is a very good question. Absolutely correct to raise it. There is a lot of uncertainty hanging over us at the moment as to obviously what the future holds, exactly how the emergence from COVID coronavirus will work its way through for us, what that will mean about expenditure. Comes to that, what it might mean about reduced expenditure, because there are areas where some expenditure is reduced. So we clearly need to plan for an emergence from coronavirus, but at the same time we do need to be a bit cautious because there are genuine unknowns out there. Okay, good. Thank you for your question, Ken. Right, I think now, as Ken said, he just got under the wire there. I can't see any more hands, so I think I'll just invite people to let me know if they're happy to note / agree the resource and performance report for Q4, please. Okay, we're there. Thank you all very much indeed for that. And thank you, Alex and Martin, for presenting those two items. And thank you, Sass and Emily and Scott, for chipping in with very helpful contributions as well. Thank you all very much indeed.
Thanks a lot.
Okay, this moves us on to item 6 on the agenda. If I might say, just before we get into item 6, potentially this has got a part 2 component. if we do go into part 2, that will be to the exclusion of the public, which means that we will have to switch off the streaming out to the public. And you know, there's a little bit of a palaver in that. So and also, if people do wish to touch on part 2 items, by definition, it's important that they only do so when we get to the part 2 stage. So what I'm going to invite us to do now is just look at item 6, first and foremost, if I can put it this way, in a part 1 context, and then we'll see where we get to. If we need to go into part 2, we will, but if we don't, then we won't. So with that very much in mind, if I could, Paul, you got a question? Sorry,
yeah,
Paul.
Bob. Thanks, Bob. I should have said at the beginning that I do have a potential interest here as a local Broxbourne member and a member of the Broxbourne Cabinet. The report sort of talks about potential compensation to Broxbourne at 5.7, and it's sort of reading the report, it seems that it might be discretionary if Broxbourne wants to pursue that. So I just make that point. And in the appendix 2, if you see that the interested land that Broxbourne has, which is divided by the quadrangle, obviously that chops off part of the development. So I'd just like to put that on the record, if that's okay, Chairman.
Yeah, sure. Okay, thank you very much indeed. Okay, thank you, Paul, very much. Well, let's see where we go. So I'm going to ask Carolyn Clark, or maybe Emily, who's come back on the screen big time. Carolyn or Emily, if one of you could present this, I'd be very, very grateful. Thank you.
Afternoon, Chair. Afternoon, everyone. So I'm presenting this afternoon, this item. So you will have had a paper in your pack. The reason that this is at the resources panel is because of the fact that there is a property element to support the delivery of extra care, which is being delivered by Adult Care Services. So the recommendation that we are seeking here is that we can appropriate the site from the original education purposes it was originally acquired for to adult care, and to seek to get delegated authority to deal with the disposal to an extra care residential provider in the future. And those are the only property elements that we are seeking at this particular panel. Eastern Playing Fields is a site within the Broxbourne district. There was a 2019 Cabinet panel that set out the procedure to look to put extra care across Hertfordshire, and Eastern Playing Fields was identified as one of the sites that could support that provision. So this is very much property working in conjunction with Adult Care Services to help to deliver extra care across the county. Extra Care has a £16 million capital budget, which has been secured in the integrated plan. And this is the first of the sites that we are looking to take forward as part of that project. Eastern Playing Fields was originally acquired for educational purposes and was part of the former St Mary's High School. There was a Cabinet decision in 2001 to redevelop the St Mary's High School in an alternative location, and that also included its expansion at the time. The Eastern Playing Field site was last used in 2009, and both the school and the playing fields were re-provided on the new St Mary's High School site. So they gained additional land through that previous consented approval. We have been working with Adult Care colleagues to take forward a potential transaction with a registered provider. They would look to provide extra care housing on this site, and we are working with them to determine what that looks like in terms of the number of units, and you'll see reference within the paper to the fact the site has the potential to deliver up to about 130 units of extra care. Feedback from the marketplace is that preference would probably be for less than that and be within the realms of 70 to 90 units, both from a construction cost point of view, but also from a management perspective, in the fact that it would be easier for them to manage a lower number of units. We have also referenced in the paper the fact that we are looking at transacting on a leasehold basis. That is so that we can also ensure the delivery of extra care long term on this site by relevant clauses within that lease. The market would normally expect potentially a freehold transaction, but they have indicated that a lease over 250 years would probably be acceptable, and we are currently looking at the potential for up to a 999-year lease to ensure both the delivery of the scheme but also the long-term hold and usage on that site. We're working currently with registered providers that have expressed interest and looking to take those forward. The financial implications of it are set out in the Part 2, as the Chair has previously indicated. And at this stage, what we are seeking approval to do is to continue to progress those discussions and for the Director of Resources, in consultation with the Executive Member, to be able to agree the final terms once they are available.
Thank you. Emily, yeah, you're done, I think. Yes. Thank you very much, Emily. If I could just draw members' attention to page 96 of the pack, para 3, which sets out recommendations. If members are happy, having heard what Emily has just said, and also having read the papers, including the Part 2 papers, if members are happy to simply vote on items 3.1 and 3.2 now, I think I'm right to say we would not need to have a Part 2 discussion. But if anybody does want to have a Part 2 discussion without identifying the issue, you will need to say so, and in which case we will, of course, move into Part 2. So I've got a hand from Sally Symington.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you, Emily. Chairman, I wasn't going to propose immediately, or I'm not proposing that we go to Part 2, but I wanted to propose an amendment to the to 3.2 based on the wording of 6.7, which is to ensuring units deliver affordable housing. I'd like to propose that we insert in line 5, where it says agreed disposal terms, the words to provide affordable extra care units.
Okay. I think my first reaction is that I'm not quite sure that that amendment is called for. Affordable units obviously is a matter of planning policy, and no doubt will be taken into account in relation to any recommendations that would be given to the to me and indeed the executive member for adult care going forward. I will just look sideways to either Emily or indeed Scott to see whether they share my immediate reaction there. Emily, if you have a view, you express it, but if you don't, then by all means don't feel that you need to.
I think there is a desire for us to very much deliver affordable housing here. I think one of the things we need to consider is the viability of the scheme, and we need to be able to ensure that the scheme is financially viable. That may require the inclusion of some private housing to be able to support it. So whilst I'm not uncomfortable with the inclusion of affordable housing, and it's very much our desire to deliver that, I think we need to be conscious of the fact that for a viable scheme, we may need to have something which is more of a mix. And also that may be driven by what the market requires as well, because this isn't going to be delivered by HCC. This is going to be very much delivered by the registered provider, and they will therefore need to make sure that they are able to have a scheme that is viable themselves. Otherwise, we may end up with something that we cannot deliver.
So, Chair, maybe depending on the wishes of members and the committee, is there some sort of hybrid or sort of compromise there that that's subject to viability in relation to the scheme that the council looks to sort of deliver or the developer delivers sufficient aspiration of affordable housing off the back of this scheme. So it's really more that subject to viability that we work towards affordability.
Thank you, Scott. If I might come in there again, I think if I might say, Emily's response fits with my reaction, as does yours, which is that we do need to operate within the framework of planning, and that gets you into viability and all those sorts of discussions that those of us with a background in planning are very familiar with. It may very well be that the qualification that Scott's just suggested is exactly right. I mean, all of us are very sympathetic to the benefits of affordable housing and the need to provide it. No one's going to argue against that. But we can't get ourselves caught in a little jam between aspiration and reality. I would be happy with the formula that Scott suggested, and I think you're nodding there, Sally. Are you?
Sorry, no,
I
guess what I would just draw attention to is that the paper is very orientated, and actually, as I said, I can quote it, that it says it's for affordable, but actually in translating it into what the recommendation is, it seems to fall down on this part. And I am aware of the I'm sat on, as Emily knows, because I've spoken to her about this. I have had this happen in my ward, so I do have some experience, not of the provision by the county, but of private provision. And I guess an indication of direction, and I appreciate that it's not going to happen at all if it's not viable, but equally to leave it out is it by omission is, as I said, is at odds with the rest of the paper, which very much sets it up as being for that, and that's why I think it's important to have it in there that is the intention, and certainly developers are very good at finding ways to prove that they don't need to deliver affordable housing.
I can see Emily reflecting on what you're saying. If I may, Emily, just speak. If you disagree with what I'm about to say, do say. But it does seem to me that between us, actually, we're all agreed. The thing that we, if I might also say, the thing that we just cannot do is get ourselves into a fix where we've introduced some wording that then gives us a problem later on. I would think that the suggestion that Scott has made is the way to deal with this particular point. So we could work in some reference to affordable housing, but subject to viability, and I think that would give us all the objectives and indeed the flexibility that we would need. Now, in terms of that wording, I'm not a great believer in drafting by committee nor open committee. Are we content to leave that refinement to the wording to officers to add that we vote on the spirit of this conversation?
Chairman?
Yes, Ken, thank you.
I think your initial reaction to this is not to interfere with the wording that's on the recommendation is the right way to go. I don't think you should hamstring any potential future development of this site. And you're quite right. The planning authorities, when they put in applications, will determine what the requirements are at that particular time, because what we have now might not be appropriate in years to come. So the wording we've got on here is perfectly good. There's no point sticking in extra words just to clog up the recommendation and hamstring any future commercial operation.
Thank you, Ken, very much. I see other hands now, so let's take some other hands. Colette Whitelow. Colette, are you coming?
So sorry, Chairman. Yeah. I think affordability and viability are the key words here. As long as the recommendation that is put forward reflects that in the spirit of what you've just said, I'm more than happy to go ahead. Again, and echoing Ken's comments, I don't want us to be hamstrung by getting ourselves hog-tied into something that we then can't deliver, which would be foolish in the extreme, to be honest.
Yeah, thank you very much, Colette. Thank you. Steve Jarvis.
Thank you. I mean, I think we're all clear what the paper sets out is to deliver extra care housing with a significant level of affordable provision. And that's what the paper's about. And I don't think any of us are disagreeing with that. I think the concern is that that's not actually what the recommendation as written says. It delegates power to dispose of the site. on terms to be agreed. It doesn't even say it has to be for extra care housing, let alone that it has to include any measure of affordability. And I don't think that the rest of the paper is advancing that we should just dispose of this site for whatever deal can be done. That's not my understanding of what the suggestion is. So I think the recommendation ought to reflect what we're setting out to do in the rest of the report. And I accept that we need to have some words in around viability, because as Emily White has said, it may well be the case that there turns out to be a need for a mix of some affordable and some non-affordable. But this is not, we're not considering the disposal of this house for commercial general market housing development, are we? So the recommendation ought to be clear that that's not what we're intending to do, in my view.
Yeah, okay. Does anyone else have a comment? Not seeing any more hands. All right. Okay, to try and summarise, I think it probably is right to say that we don't need to amend the wording, because the report needs to be read in the whole, and if there is a delegation, it will be in the context of the report as a whole. But on the conversation so far, I think the notion of some additional wording that links affordable housing to viability makes that issue subject to. I think the mood so far is that nobody would object to that. So I think I'm going to propose that we do continue, or we move forward on the basis that recommendation 3.2 will carry that small additional wording. So there will be a reference to affordability, but in the context of viability. If anybody disagrees with that way forward, will they please say so now? I see Sally Symington has her hand up again.
Thank you, Chairman. No, I'm not putting my hand up to disagree. I'm going to agree with the previous proposal you made, that the exact wording is left to the officers.
Yeah, okay, thank you. All right, okay, so now that was a good and interesting discussion. I'm just going to give people now a moment to just indicate, maybe by a hand, if they feel the need, or sorry, I'll put this again. If you could indicate through chat, actually, if you feel any need at all to move into part 2. I'm looking at chat now. Okay, I'll just give everybody a running tally. All the people who've commented so far have all said they feel no need to go to part 2. And I'll just let that run for maybe another few seconds. Okay, no one is calling for this to go to part 2, and a number of people have confirmed that they're happy for it not to go to part 2. So I'm not therefore intending to take this into the part 2 section. Unless Elaine corrects me, I think that does take us to paragraph 3 on page 96 of the pack. And I'm just going to read out the recommendations, albeit for reasons discussed, I can't give you the full wording for 3.2. So what I'm inviting panel to vote on is paragraph 3.1, which is to invite panel to recommend to Cabinet that it authorise the appropriation of Eastern Playingfields, Goss Lane, Cheshunt to adult care services. And then 3.2, to invite panel to recommend to Cabinet that it authorise the Director of Resources, in consultation with the Director of Adult Care Services, the Executive Member for Resource and Performance, and the Executive Member for Adult Care, Health and Wellbeing, to agree and approve disposal terms, including the implementation or transfer of the 2011 deed of grant to facilitate access via Goffs Lane and agreeing compensation land, if required, facilitating the sale of Eastern Playing Fields, Goffs Lane, Cheshunt. And 3.2 will have the little additional wording that we've discussed and agreed in outline. Elaine, can I take a vote on both 3.1 and 3.2 together, or must I split them?
No, you can do it together because members have indicated they're happy to do it. Yeah.
Thank you. So I'm inviting a vote on 3.1 and 3.2 taken together. If you agree, please say so in chat. Lots of agreeds have come in. I'm just now waiting for Elaine just to confirm that she's happy that we've got there. Thank you very much, Elaine. So it's confirmed that we have agreement on item 6, the recommendations of 3.1 and 3.2, 3.2 being slightly amended as we've discussed. Thank you all very much indeed for that. Now, on my agenda, we've then got item 7, which is any other Part 1 business, and I'm unaware that there is any other Part 1 business.
That's correct, Chairman.
Thank you very much indeed, Elaine. That does then bring us on to Part 2, Part 2 has 2 items. One is minutes, and the second is the Part 2 aspect of the Eastern Playing Fields item that we've just discussed. We do not need to get into the Eastern Playing Fields item, but I take it, Elaine, that you do need us to go into Part 2, do you, just so we can agree the minutes?
The minutes were agreed at the beginning of the meeting, Chairman. We agreed the Part 1 and the Part 2 at the top of the meeting, so that's fine.
Okay, that's excellent. In that case, then, I think we have completed the business. I think we finished the meeting, which is really quite impressive. If I can just let people know that the next meeting, I believe I might say, takes place on the 5th of July. With that, thank you all very much indeed for being with us today. Very good debate. Thank you very much indeed. Bye-bye, everybody.
Thank you, Chairman.
Bye-bye,
everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Chairman. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.